Well, at the time of doing this, we are mere an hour or so away from PMQs, and of course, the speculation someone could be walking. Now, of course, this will come out the day after. That may be right, that may be wrong. Who knows what crazy stuff could have happened in the last 24 hours? But I figured today, why not leave that over for a side for the moment and have a look at Conservative Home. Let's check back in on Will because, oh my word, Will has been going through some interesting changes of late. After all, he wrote the piece in the pre-afterglow of the local election saying, we did all right, we've lost a couple of seats, but you know what? We did all right. And then, of course, came his next article, which was absolutely fire and fury. We are just going to, if you are going to be a Conservative MP, you might as well just stick underpants on your head and, pencils up your nose and employ the Blackadder strategy because that's the only way you might win as a Conservative MP. So he is not a very happy camper, as we say up north. And honestly, some of the stuff he has been writing in the past couple of weeks that we haven't covered has been incredibly salty. But this is in response to Monday's Sunak's big reset. So I have no doubt that maybe given the fallout of what could happen today, maybe nothing happens, maybe something does, maybe we'll be popping in on Will again. But this just goes to show you where he currently is. And not only that, but once again, where the non-parliamentary Conservative Party really is at the moment. A lot of them seem to be really wishing that they had ditched Rishi Sunak when they had the chance. So, before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club as well. We did a video just yesterday for you all. So if you're Patreon or you're a Pony Clubber, go check that out with all the other videos that we've done as well. Thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. Like I say, click the like button, click the share button, leave a comment down below, and of course, as always, let's crack on into this. So, this comes from Conservative Home with the title of Sunak is right to tell voters that things can only get worse, but why on earth should they listen? So, oh dear. The march of war begins, even if Rishi Sunak is unwilling to confirm the general election date. He used his speech yesterday to gear Westminster up for a long campaign. His message was familiar, if bleak. Here is the deciding face, voters. The choice at the next general election is, who do you trust to keep you safe? Asking so direct question can be risky, as Edward Heath once found. If anything, I would more compare it to Cameron versus Miliband. That's what it really seemed to be more echoing. He seemed to be sort of trying to call forth that, ancient mystical nonsense of, do you want steady, stable government or do you want the coalition of chaos? Honestly, it did felt like he should have been cosplaying as David Cameron. In fact, wouldn't surprise me to find out if Cameron and maybe had some influence in this speech. Who knows? But anyway, back to this. Nevertheless, the Prime Minister wants to go to the country on Britain's security. The next 5 years, he believes, will be some of our most dangerous, saying that we face threats from an axis of authoritarian states, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, and from illegal migration, cultural conflict, and AI. Brace yourself, since more will change in the next 5 years than in the last 30. Honestly, that sentence, that sentence almost feels like a tech bro. And we know Rishi Sunak's a tech bro, but that's tech bro language like 101. You don't understand. AI is going to change everything, and they hype everything up. It's going to bring major changes. And yes, AI is going to bring changes, but is it going to be like truly ground shattering? Not yet. While AI technology has massively made big leaps and bounds in the past couple of years, just look at the new Chat GPT launch that was recently. It is not to the crazy scale that some of the pro AI people posit, and it isn't going to be necessarily as apocalyptic as the anti AI people. Now, we do need some regulation in and around AI. I am fully on board with that, but getting back to that, it's typical that language. It is such tech bro language for that. So Will continues. I do share Sunak's lack of optimism for the near future. Having previously written about closing every known AI lab and my fear that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan will soon send the global economy into meltdown, Will's been on the doomer pill for well over a year now. I cannot demur my way for theme of bleakness that is now taken up by the King's chief minister. Great minds do think alike and all that, and Sunak used it to now frame the coming choice for voters. And oh boy, did he really put that in very stark contrast. So, whom do you trust to actually navigate you through the quote storms ahead? Sunak, who has promised to hike defense spending to 2.5% of GDP. It has an honesty about the costs of net zero and fought hard to deliver for the Rwanda policy. Again, 2.5 spending on defense spending for GDP. He radically fought against that and only really came round when Conservative MPs were really hounding him over it. And then he went, oh, fine, okay, we'll raise it. The honesty over the costs of net zero are not true because the benefits far outweigh any of the costs for net zero. That is the truth. When you look all into it, we should be really, really, really leaning into net zero on this and working with Europe to sort of really achieve net zero. And again, fought hard to deliver a Rwanda policy. You mean fought hard to deliver a policy and then got forced by the right wing, hard right of his party to try and deliver a really hard Rwanda policy. And then the One Nation MPs sort of dragged it back from the abyss to deliver a policy that is not going to work, which Will himself has actually admitted the Rwanda policy ain't going to work as a form of deterrent or anything like that. But anyway, back to it. Or Keir Starmer, who wants to scrap the last, hasn't committed to the first, and plans to use one or the two to delivering rolling blackouts by 2030. Again, there is no evidence that doing this is going to deliver rolling blackouts. But Will has been very much on the anti-net zero campaign for quite some time. So there you go. So the Prime Minister, of course, did not hold back. From switching from, quote, embracing Jeremy Corbyn to embracing Natalie Elfpick, Starmer has, quote, completely and utterly principled. It shows you cannot trust what the guy says in the cynical pursuit of power at any price. Corbyn was mentioned several times. So is the fact that Angela Rayner and David Lammy have voted against Trident renewal. So, okay, who wants to do this? Should we renew Trident? It is obviously UK's nuclear defense system. There are pros. I see, I see the pros. I see the cons against it. It does cost a lot of money to do. And of course, the actual missiles themselves aren't maintained by us. They are now maintained by America. Whereas the actual launch system itself is us. There was obviously the big meme recently about launching a nuclear missile that didn't work, etc., etc. But defense, regardless, is going to be, I think, something that does come up in the next election. And honestly, here's the thing: Jeremy Corbyn, awful, awful on defense, really bad. One of his very poor areas. Starmer, I think, is going to be a lot better on that in a in an upcoming general election. I think we'll see that in the not only the campaign but in the manifesto as well. So, but again, we'll see what happens. So, Will continues. In fairness, I on that I agree with Labour's deputy leader and shadow foreign secretary. Nevertheless, Sunak was punchy and at his best when he claimed that, quote, it feels a profound sense of urgency about Britain's challenges. You sat up and listened. I can't remember a single gag. He is not only in politics for the spreadsheets or the full-time pre-California. He loves, quote, his country and will say so. Yeah, so much so, he's pretty much prepared to go back to California, has a green card all ready to go, because I can guarantee you the second Rishi Sunak gets out of office, he's going straight to California. So, he says he wants a Britain that can, quote, feel proud again. Not a disagreeable statement, but he also presented a very grim picture of the present. Extremists, he suggested, are exploiting these global conflicts to divide us. Really, how about the extremists in his own party and on the right? You know, you don't see him tackle those extremists. Anyway, he continued, anti-Semitic chants on our streets, gender activists hijacking children's sexual education. I've never seen any evidence of gender activists hijacking children's sexual education. But there you go. Aggressive fringe groups forcing their views on us. Sunak's Britain is under assault. Love it. Aggressive fringe groups forcing their views on us. You mean like Brexit and the hardcore right-wing Brexiteer fundamentalists who forced their views after the referendum on Britain? Do you mean those those aggressive fringe groups causing, Sunak's life massive problems? Anyway, he continued. He said, life is pretty miserable, but don't let Labour make it worse. It is not the most compelling election slogan. Hardly morning in America, is it? But what else does number 10 have to run on? It's a fair point. I've said this as well, Will. What does he have to run on? He's got almost nothing at this point. So even if the economy is, quote, going gangbusters, voters are still poorer in 2019. Sunak might want the election to be on the future, but he cannot escape the past. Perhaps swap Jill Cooper for F. Scott Fitzgerald. Here's the thing. Sunak wants to run on the future. Sunak just cancelled one of the best public works and public infrastructure works there was going, HS2. How can this guy run on the future when he has so effectively cancelled the future? But there you go. And then that is most the easiest win ever for Labour, because they can come back and just go, okay, we're going to rebuild HS2. We're going to restart all that back up. There you go. But anyway, Sunak also timed his speech for the 14th anniversary of the Conservatives retaking power back in 2010. Having written off the last 30 years at October's party conference, he realized that trashing your entire time in government just ahead of a general election is not wholly wise, especially if you make your predecessor, but your 3 of your foreign secretaries, voters might actually notice. And that's the thing. Sunak will have to defend his, the entire Conservative tenure in government since 2010, since they came to power and have been in power. They have not made things better. They have only seemed to have made things worse. You've already pointed out, Will, that yes, Voters are now poorer than they were in 2019, but they're also poorer than they were in 2010. It's hardly the greatest endorsement of the party. So, to those assembled at the policy exchange, Wolves continues, a more sympathetic audience than most, Sunak was lauded a succession of Tory achievements, dating back to before he was an MP. It was all the greatest hits. Michael Gove's education reforms, the creation of over 4 million jobs, the COVID vaccine, NHS funding, the triple lock, Brexit, and gay marriage. Has he been reading Ian Mansfield's tweets? Here's the thing: a lot of these things aren't really that successful. Michael Gove's education reforms are questionable, to say the least. The creation of over 4 million jobs. How many jobs have we lost in sort of comparison to those 4 million created? Interesting statistic to look at. You know, the COVID vaccine, probably the only thing they could sort of really run on. Although even then, it's really dubious to say how successful they were as a government about rolling out that particular vaccine, etc., etc. We know all that before. NHS funding, if you're celebrating NHS funding, why then is the NHS in probably one of its worst situations it has ever been in? So much for celebrating, NHS funding. The whole triple lock pension thing, while that has been, quote, great for pensioners, and of course the Tory sort of voting bloc, hardly been the most successful thing for everyone else. Brexit, well, is Brexit. It ain't going sort of very well. Again, look at all the trade data, look at all the other stuff and the repercussions that it's brought up. But there you go. And of course, gay marriage. Probably the only success next to the COVID vaccine you could probably really say they've really had. But there you go. So, your opinion on how impressive that looks obviously depends on your own idiosyncratic metrics for judging a Conservative government. You might think that shoveling money into a socialist dump fire, shoveling money into a socialist dump fire. Is he talking about the NHS? Allowing homosexuals to marry and putting jabs into the arms was appeasing the high taxing, lockdown loving, lanyard flaunting, tofu eating wokarati. Or you might not, as I don't, and so it goes. So, yeah, honestly, all these things really aren't that, greatest things to run on, because even if you were to say those are like your greatest hits, then you've got to look at all the flops that happened in between of all those as well. So, even so, Sunak cannot pick and choose which parts of the last 14 years he wants voters to remember. And when Labour, quote, ignores the achievements and tries to reduce the last 14 years to 49 days, voters should be aware that they are, quote, trying to distract you from the hard things, from the things that matter the most, the future. Never mind about that mini budget. Haven't you heard? We're banning banana vapes. Exactly. Even if Labour does run on the fact, well, look, they delivered you, Liz Truss. They've got almost nothing to run on. I mean, oh, we're banning banana vapes. Oh no. Yeah, real vote winner that, Rishi. So, continues. Yet, this shows the absurdity of taking a Jean's-faced approach to our time in government. Sunak cannot run on the good whilst ignoring the bad. And overwhelmingly, it has been far, far more bad than good. And voters are not stupid. Even if they never say thank you, he might not want them to think of the phonics, the vaccines, but he can't stop them thinking of austerity, Partygate, crumbling schools, soaring immigration, and the worst prime minister in history. Yeah, all brought to us by a party who was continuing a message of vote for us, things are going to be better. We're the party of fiscal responsibility. And yet Sunak is trying that exact same approach of during his speech. Oh, don't worry, the future is going to be bright. It's going to be bright conservative future for all. Trust me, guys, it'll be jam tomorrow. Yeah, I think voters really fed up of that conservative message because that has been the message going all the way back really to Boris Johnson at this point. And Boris Johnson, well, Boris Johnson used all the jam, and Rishi Sunak is now scraping very thinly as much jam as he can. And voters are now looking at that going, that's not a lot of jam there, Rishi. So, anyway, this was a very SW1 focused speech, and not because it was delivered at a think tank where Sunak once worked. This confirmed to the assembled hacks of what number 10's basic electoral strategy would be. I love it. Oh, all these hacks that were assembled there. This is what, saying this is what number 10 strategy is going to be. I honestly think Will has a very, very low estimation of his fellow commentariats. So, since Idec Laveau's store cupboard is so bare, it does not take a huge leap of imagination that there are only two election campaigns: change versus continuity. Furthermore, in trying to prep voters for the torrent of misery likely coming our way over the next 5 years, Sunak revealed a truth that most politicians are usually unwilling to: that the vast majority of what decides our fate, geopolitical crises, economic downturns, and the quality of the weather, are well beyond the control of those we elect. Why admit just to how powerless they are? Events, dear boy. And this is something else that we have seen, that we are really, every country is almost going down the river. And of course, at times, the waters are going to be calm. They're going to become a bit choppy. We might go through rapids. We might be dodging logs of, geopolitical crises all the time. But like it or not, these rivers continually flow on. And ultimately, what really matters is the people at the helm, the people at the paddling, making sure to try and get through the country in the best way possible. And if you look at how the Tories have handled 14 years of, geopolitical crises, economic downturns, they do not have the best sort of career out of this. So it is again a wafer thin strategy to try and run on. But back to it. So because most politicians are in denial about their pointlessness, they struggle to brandish what little power they actually possess. Didn't you know leaning to Harry Cole is 90% of the job? Though I like that. Leaking to Harry Cole is 90% of the job. Wow. Will must have a really low estimate of his fellow party MPs. Honestly, I've said this before. Will he's gone through a Brexit crisis as someone who was a young conservative who heavily campaigned for Brexit. He's going through his midlife Brexit crisis, and now he's going through his own midlife Tory crisis, where he's now increasingly becoming very, very doomer about the prospects of his own party, and has now a really low opinion of his own party if he thinks that 90% of their job is leaking stuff to Harry Cole. Anyway, through, quote, his honest intellectual and sheer dogginess, Sunak is just one of the few who might actually cut through this madness. Yesterday, we saw a premier he might once have had the chance to be. Yeah, too little, too late. Congratulations, you can put on an act, but why hasn't Sunak been the leader? This is going to what I've always said, that Sunak is just not a leader. You know, you can put on a good performance, but what do you do for the rest of the time? Yeah, congratulations, you had a good performance. Now you've got to get back into the, into the mud pit and start, really sort of raking that mud. Start getting to the, the meat and potatoes of it. Sunak has not done that. He has been and obviously continues to be a very terrible leader. It's part of his biggest problem. So, continues, but none of us do choose the hand that we are dealt. So, after his retirement, Otto von Bismarck said that positive undertakings in politics are extraordinarily difficult, and when they succeed, one should thank God that they led to a boon and not to a fault with trivialities. The best case for Sunak back in 2022 was that he was not Liz Truss, and he is still the best choice for a party and the country. Yeah, wow. The choice, he wasn't Liz Truss, that was not then put to the country. Now it is really being put to the country, and he's had well over a year in office, promising that within a year he could turn this round. So, for all the mud that one has to fling at the Prime Minister as part of his job, I would still rather a Conservative government led by him, Cameron and Jeremy Hunt, than one of Starmer, Lammy, and Rachel Reeves. I would trust him more to navigate the choppy waters ahead than a Labour Party that still can't believe its luck, has no idea what it wants to do, and will say anything to be elected. Well, I could say that about, Sunak's speech and about many of the, past Tory leadership campaigns, but there you go. So Labour Party does know what it wants to achieve. Um, yeah, it generally can't believe its luck, and that is all down to your own party. And it's, remember, Sunak is the leader of the party. You know, you can't say all this bad stuff, be so negative, and then go, well, he's the best of a bad lot. What are we gonna do? He's the leader of your party. He does bear a lot of responsibility for what goes on. Anyway, so let's finish this off. So, if politics is the art of the possible, the attainable, and the art of the next best, the choice is very clear, as the Prime Minister made it yesterday. Ignore the noise off. Either Sunak will be number 10 or Starmer will be. If you want to avoid the latter, vote for the former. Neither might be able to survive the coming tidal wave. And there is no Winston Churchill to hand, but Sunak is the best that we have. And if Sunak is the best that the Tory party can offer, then I think it speaks volumes to the amount of terrible talent that really exists in the Tory party. So, if nothing else, he was right to say that things can only get worse. And oh, they can get worse, infinitely worse, as we saw yesterday, regardless of which party is in power. But why on earth should voters even listen? Better to live in blissful ignorance than to have to make honest choices, and into the valley we will ride. And a lot of people now going down. Uh, so someone here, I see the con socialist clowns, after begging everyone to trust them on security and defense, have today announced 2 Navy destroyers and have at least lasted 9 years of service left in them to be scrapped. HMS Westminster and HMS Argyle. The only thing that needs to be scrapped is the shower of a party/government. Yeah, like I say, no one is overwhelmingly overwhelmingly positive. And of course, they're saying nothing about the leaked WhatsApp messages. I noticed they're not covering that today on Conservative Home. Who knows? Maybe later, we'll see. But yeah, more fear from a Conservative Party that knows the game is up, that they know they're doomed, and they know they're on the way out. So hey, roll on a general election, and to be honest, I cannot wait. I cannot wait because oh my word, the morning after, and like the week or two after from the general election is going to be delicious. It is going to be delicious. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.